At 3 a.m., I lay bleeding on the cold floor, my legs snapped like glass. My stepdad's fists kept coming, and through swollen eyes, I begged my mom to stop him. But she just stood there, watching, silent. Stay with me as I take you through my story, and if it touches your heart, I'd be grateful if you could support our channel. Share this, leave a like, and subscribe so more people can hear voices like mine. My name is Grace Miller. I'm 17 years old, a girl from a small town in Ohio. If you had seen me at school, you'd probably think I was just another quiet kid, the kind who kept her head down in the hallways and smiled politely at teachers. On the outside, I was normal, but behind the walls of my house, life was nothing close to normal. When my dad was alive, things were different. I remember the way he used to read me stories before bed, or how he'd sneak me extra ice cream after dinner. Our home wasn't perfect, but it was safe. It was warm. After he passed away, everything shifted. My mom remarried a man named Mark, and that's when the light in my world began to fade. Mark wasn't cruel at first, not openly. He had rules, too many of them, but I thought maybe he just wanted order. But soon the yelling started. Then the slaps. Then the punishments for mistakes that didn't even make sense. I tried to tell my mom how much it hurt, how scared I felt, but she always shook her head and told me I was overreacting. "He's just trying to make you stronger, Grace," she'd whisper, like that made the bruises on my arms less real. I learned to move quietly, to breathe softly, to hide away in my room whenever I could. But no matter how careful I was, something always set him off. And the worst part wasn't the pain. It was seeing my mom look at me with empty eyes, as if she'd chosen him over me long ago. That night, the night everything shattered, I had just gotten up for a glass of water. The house was silent, and I tiptoed like a thief in my own home. But the sound of the cupboard door must have woken him. Suddenly, he was there, dragging me by the arm, shouting words I barely understood. My heart pounded, and I tried to explain, but explanations never worked. His fist connected with my face. I fell hard, and I felt the sharp crack in my leg like glass splitting apart. I screamed for my mom. I begged her, through tears and blood, to stop him. She stood in the doorway, her face pale, her arms crossed tight around her chest. She didn't say a word. She didn't move. She just watched as if I wasn't her daughter anymore, but some stranger she couldn't be bothered to save. That was the moment I knew. My mom wasn't coming to rescue me. She had already abandoned me long before my body hit that floor. And in that silence, I felt something inside me break that would never be whole again. Before everything went dark, I used to have a different kind of life. My earliest memories are of soft laughter, of sitting on the porch with my dad as he taught me how to whistle, or how to skip stones across the creek behind our house. He wasn't perfect. He worked long hours at the factory and sometimes came home too tired to play, but he always made sure I felt loved. I remember how his hand would ruffle my hair as he called me his smart girl. Those little things made me feel safe, like I had someone in the world who would always protect me. When he died, I was only 10. I don't think I fully understood what death meant then, but I knew my world had shattered. I remember the funeral, the heavy silence, and the way my mom's shoulders slumped like she was carrying the weight of the sky. For a while, it was just the two of us. She worked hard, and though we didn't have much, we laughed sometime. We ate simple dinners together, watched old movies on the couch, and I believed, maybe foolishly, that we'd be okay. But then Mark came into our lives. At first, I tried to be happy for her. She smiled more when he was around, and after years of watching her cry alone at night, I wanted to believe he would make things better. He seemed polite enough at the start, buying me small gifts and asking about school. I thought maybe he would be a father figure. It didn't take long for the mask to slip. The gifts stopped. The rules began. Suddenly, I couldn't stay late after school or hang out with friends without his permission. He wanted the TV at a certain volume, the house spotless at all times, my homework done before I even thought about dinner. If I slipped up even once, his voice thundered through the house. And then there was Jason, his son from another relationship. Jason was 19, loud and lazy. He left his dirty dishes in the sink, skipped chores, and stayed out until all hours of the night. But Mark never seemed to notice. If I forgot to fold the laundry, he'd yell at me for being careless. If Jason left clothes piled on the floor, Mark would just laugh it off. "Boys will be boys," he'd say, like Jason was made of gold and I was made of dirt. I thought my mom would step in, the way she used to when kids at school picked on, but she didn't. At first she'd say, "Don't take it personally, Grace. He's just strict." Then slowly her words turned sharper. "Stop exaggerating. You know how much he does for us. Don't make trouble." It was like watching her slip away piece by piece, until one day she wasn't my mother anymore. She was his wife first, his defender, his shield. And me? I was just someone who needed to stay quiet, follow the rules, and accept that my childhood had been stolen the moment Mark walked into our home. The first time it happened, I almost convinced myself it wasn't real. Mark had grabbed my arm when I forgot to take the trash out. His fingers dug so deep into my skin that I carried his handprint for days, purple and ugly. He leaned down, his breath hot on my face, and hissed, "You're useless. Can't even handle something this simple." I told myself maybe he was just angry that day. Maybe I had really done something wrong. But deep down, the sting of his grip and those words stayed with me longer than the bruise itself. After that, the punishments grew sharper. If I left a light on, I had to scrub the kitchen floor until my knees ached. If my grades slipped from an A to a B, he'd call me lazy and lock my phone away for weeks. And when I dropped a glass by accident, his open hand smacked across my cheek before I could even bend down to pick up the pieces. He didn't need to scream every time. His cold, steady voice telling me I was nothing was worse than shouting. I remember one night sitting on my bed, staring at the faint bruise on my arm where he had shoved me against the door. My chest was heavy with a kind of fear I didn't know how to carry. So I did the only thing I could. I went to my mom. She was in the kitchen, folding laundry, and I stood there, trembling, my throat tight. "Mom," I whispered, "he hurts me." He grabbed me. He called me worthless. My voice cracked, but I hoped she'd look at me, hold me, say something that would make me feel safe again. Instead, she sighed and shook her head like I was being dramatic. "Grace, he's just trying to make you stronger. You're too sensitive. Life isn't easy, and Mark knows that. He wants you to toughen up." Her words cut sharper than his hand ever did. It wasn't just that she didn't believe me, it was that she believed him more. After that, things got worse because Jason picked up on it. He saw how his dad talked to me, how Mom stayed silent, and he realized he could do the same. He'd laugh when Mark called me names, echoing the words like a parrot. Sometimes he'd block the hallway and sneer, "Careful, don't mess up, or Dad's gonna fix you again." Every time he mocked me, my stomach twisted, but I stayed quiet because I knew no one would stand up for me. That was when the truth hit me. My mom wasn't going to save me. She had chosen her side, and it wasn't mine. I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was just the problem child, the burden, the one she'd rather silence than protect. And standing in that house, surrounded by their cruel laughter, I realized for the first time in my life that I was truly alone. It didn't take long before Mark's rules became more than just punishments. They became walls around me. At first, it was little things. He'd check my phone every night, scrolling through my texts and deleting any number he didn't recognize. Then he started taking it all together, locking it in his drawer whenever he decided I didn't deserve it. The phone that connected me to the outside world, to my friends and classmates, became a privilege he dangled over me like a leash. Soon, I wasn't allowed to stay after school anymore. I used to enjoy study groups or helping with the yearbook club, but Mark put an end to that. "You don't need to waste time," he said flatly. "Come home straight after class. Home is where you belong." I remember standing by the windows in the library, watching my friends laugh together as they walked out in groups, while I clutched my backpack and hurried home like a prisoner heading back to her cell. Inside the house, the silence grew heavier. My mom used to hug me absent-mindedly when she passed by, or smile when I told her about something funny at school. Those moments stopped. She became distant, her warmth shrinking away like the sun in winter. Whenever Mark raised his voice, she'd shoot me a warning glance and murmur, "Don't provoke him, Grace. Just do what he asks." The words felt like betrayal every time. She wasn't telling him to calm down. She was telling me to stay small, quiet, invisible. The nights were the hardest. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I wanted so badly to text my friends, to tell someone what was happening, but Mark had cut me off from everyone. Even when I was at school, I felt different, like I was carrying a secret no one else could see. I laughed less, spoke less, until eventually people stopped asking me to hang out. Isolation wasn't just something Mark forced on me. It became something I wore like a shadow. I started counting the months until I turned 18. I clung to that number like a lifeline, scribbling it on the corners of notebooks, marking it on a hidden calendar in my... Freedom wasn't close, but it was coming, and sometimes that hope was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. But the days in between felt endless. Every time Mark barked an order, every time Jason smirked at me, every time my mom looked away instead of speaking up, I felt myself shrink a little more. The house wasn't a home anymore. It was a cage. I wasn't Grace Miller, the girl who used to laugh with her dad by the creek or dream about college. I was just a ghost drifting through narrow hallways, waiting for the day the lock finally clicked open. And yet, even in that cage, a part of me whispered, "Just hold on. 18 is coming. Hold on." That night is burned into me like a scar I can never erase. It was 3 a.m., the kind of hour where the world feels hushed, and the house should have been safe in silence. I couldn't sleep, my throat dry, so I slipped out of bed and tiptoed toward the kitchen for a glass of water. I moved carefully, trying not to creak the floorboards, but even the smallest sound seemed loud in the stillness. I opened the cupboard slowly, and that tiny squeak of the hinge changed everything. The next thing I heard was his footsteps. Heavy. Angry. They echoed down the hallway like a warning drum. Mark appeared, his face twisted with rage, his eyes bloodshot from being woken. "What are you doing sneaking around my house?" he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. Before I could answer, he grabbed me by the wrist, his grip iron tight. He yanked me forward so hard I stumbled against the counter. My heart was racing, and I tried to explain, whispering, "I just wanted some water." But he didn't care. His hand clamped harder, and he shoved me back. "Liar," he spat. "Always sneaking. Always up to something." The first blow came so fast I couldn't brace myself. His fist slammed into my shoulder, sending me crashing against the table. I gasped in shock, my body already trembling, but he didn't stop. He hit me again, shouting words that blurred together. Worthless, stupid, nothing. Each strike blurred into the next until my ears were ringing and my vision swam. I tried to run, but my leg caught the corner of a chair. I tripped, falling hard onto the floor. There was a sharp crack, a blinding pain shooting through my leg, and I screamed. The pain was so fierce it felt like fire tearing me apart. I knew instantly something was broken. My leg bent in a way it shouldn't be. "Please," I sobbed, tears mixing with the blood from a split on my lip. I turned toward the doorway where my mom stood, her arms folded across her chest. Her face was pale, her eyes fixed on me, but there was no movement, no rush forward to help. My voice broke as I called, "Mom, please stop him. Help me." She didn't move. She didn't even flinch. She just stood there, her silence louder than his fist. That look in her eyes, it wasn't love, it wasn't fear, it was nothing. Cold detachment, as if I wasn't her daughter bleeding on the floor, but some stranger she barely knew. I can still remember the exact moment my heart cracked, deeper than the bone in my leg. The betrayal burned through me. It wasn't just Mark hurting me, it was my mom letting it happen, watching it happen, and choosing him over me. That night, at 3 a.m., I didn't just lose the ability to walk without pain. I lost the last fragile hope that my mother would ever protect me. That was the moment I truly became alone. The sirens cut through the night long after my screams had gone hoarse. I remember lying there on the cold floor, clutching my leg, when I heard the pounding on the door. The neighbors must have heard the chaos, maybe the shouting, maybe my cries. For a moment, hope sparked in me. Maybe this was it. Maybe someone would finally see the truth. Mark opened the door with his calm, fake smile like nothing had happened. He spoke to the officers as though they were old friends. "She tripped on the stairs," he explained smoothly, waving a hand toward me as if I were a clumsy child who'd caused trouble. "She gets up at night, sneaking around, and she fell. Woke us all up." I was still shaking, trying to catch my breath, but when the officers looked at me, I saw it in their eyes. They weren't convinced. One of them crouched near me, asking gently, "Did you fall, sweetheart? Did someone hurt you?" My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I wanted to scream the truth, to tell them everything, but Mark's presence loomed above me. His shadow was heavy, his stare a warning. Then my mom spoke. "She fell," Susan said firmly, her voice steady, her arms wrapped around herself. "I saw it. She missed a step and hit the floor hard." Her words were like another blow to my chest. I turned to her, searching her face for even a flicker of doubt, of guilt, of motherly instinct, but there was nothing. Just the same cold mask she wore in the doorway hours earlier. The cops helped get me to the hospital, but I could feel their hesitation. They knew something was wrong, yet without my words, they had no proof. At the hospital, doctors worked quickly, wrapping my leg, running tests, checking for other injuries. One of the nurses, kind and sharp-eyed, lingered longer than the others. She looked at the fading bruises along my arms, the cuts that didn't match a simple fall. "Grace," she whispered, crouching beside me, "you can tell us if someone hurt you. We can help." Tears stung my eyes. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to pour everything out, to let the truth finally breathe. But I couldn't. All I could picture was Mark's fury if I spoke, the way my mother's eyes would harden even further. Where would I go? Back to that house. Back to them, with no protection? The thought froze me. I swallowed hard and whispered. I fell. The words tasted bitter, but they were safer than the truth. The nurse's face fell, and I could tell she didn't believe me. But she nodded anyway, scribbling something in her notes. "Okay, sweetheart. We'll take care of you." As I lay there under the harsh hospital lights, I realized something painful. No rescue was coming. My neighbors had tried, the police had asked, the doctors suspected, but none of it mattered if I stayed silent. And I was too terrified not to. My family had betrayed me, and now even the world outside couldn't save me, not yet. Recovery was supposed to mean healing, but for me it became something else. It became planning. The cast on my leg slowed me down, but it also gave me time to think. For the first time, I wasn't rushing from chore to chore under Mark's order. I was forced to sit still, and in that stillness, a dangerous thought took root. I couldn't live like this anymore. If I was ever going to be free, I had to take control. At the hospital, one nurse lingered more than the others. Her name was Carla. She never pushed too hard, never demanded answers, but she always checked on me with a softness that felt foreign after years of cruelty. She'd slip me extra pudding cups, or ask me about school, or just sit with me when silence was too heavy. Once, when she thought no one was listening, she whispered, "You deserve better than this, Grace. Don't forget that." Her words clung to me like a secret light in the darkness. When I finally returned to school, hobbling with crutches, my absence had raised questions. A school counselor, Mrs. Bennett, called me into her office. She wasn't fooled by the falling down the stairs excuse. Her eyes were sharp, and her voice was gentle but steady. "Grace," she said, "I can tell something's wrong. You don't have to carry this alone." I didn't tell her everything, not yet, but her concern planted another seed. I wasn't as invisible as Mark wanted me to believe. That's when the plan began forming. I realized escape wasn't enough. Running away would leave them with their power intact, free to ruin me or someone else. No, I had to gather proof. I had to make them face consequences. The first step was evidence. When I was home alone, I started taking photos of the bruises that hadn't yet faded, angling the camera carefully so no one would notice. Every mark, every cut, I documented. Then I found the voice recorder app on my phone. Late at night, when Mark would storm into my room to spit his threats, I'd hit record and keep my phone tucked under my pillow. "One word out of line and I'll break more than your leg," he snarled once, and I captured every syllable. It was terrifying, sneaking around like that, knowing if he caught me, it would be worse than anything before. But with every photo saved, every recording tucked away in hidden folders, I felt stronger. Like I was slowly building armor, piece by piece. I wasn't ready to share it yet, not even with Mrs. Bennett or Carla. But I held on to it, guarding it like treasure. Because this wasn't just about leaving anymore. It was about making sure they paid for every bruise, every scar, every night I cried myself to sleep. Lying awake at night, I whispered to myself, "One day soon, this will all end. And when it does, it won't be me broken on the floor, it'll be them." The day I finally decided to act, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. For weeks, I had hidden away the photos of bruises, the recordings of Mark's threats, the quiet notes I'd scribbled about every time he lashed out. It felt dangerous just to hold them, like carrying fire in my pocket. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was ready to fight back. It started at school. Mrs. Bennett, the counselor who had noticed my silence before, called me into her office again. I stared at her kind eyes, and for the first time, I opened up. Not everything, but enough. I told her I had proof, that I didn't want to go home anymore, that I was afraid. She didn't flinch. Instead, she called the authorities right there while I sat across from her, clutching my phone like a lifeline. When the investigators came, I handed over everything. The photos, the voice recordings, even the timestamps of nights I'd been kept awake by Mark's rages. They listened carefully, and with each piece of evidence, I saw their expressions change from suspicion to certainty. I wasn't just a scared girl with a broken leg. I was a victim with undeniable proof. That evening, everything moved quickly. Officers arrived at the house, their cars lighting up the dark street. For once, it wasn't me trembling in fear. It was Mark. He tried to bluster, raising his voice, insisting it was all lies, that I was making it up to get attention. But when the recordings played, his own words filled the room, ugly and undeniable. His face drained of color. The handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, and for the first time, I saw him powerless. Susan stood frozen, her hands shaking as the officers turned to her. She tried to defend herself, saying she didn't know, or wasn't sure what was happening. But my silence all those years became her weapon turned against her. Failure to protect. Complicity. She had stood by and watched. It was enough. They took her too. And then there was Jason. Smug, smirking Jason, who had mocked me for every bruise and called me names until I believed them. The investigation dug into him as well. My testimony, paired with what neighbors had witnessed, his underage drinking, his harassment, left no room for him to slide free. His laughter, the one that used to haunt me in the hallways, was gone. That night, I sat in a quiet office with Mrs. Bennett by my side, the chaos still echoing in my ears. For the first time in years, I felt something new rising in my chest. Justice. It wasn't finished yet, but it had begun. The people who had broken me, betrayed me, silenced me. They were finally being forced to answer for it. As I sat there, tired but unshaken, one thought circled in my mind. I wasn't powerless anymore. I had turned the tables, and they would never again mistake my silence for weakness. When the court decided I couldn't go back to my mother's house, I was terrified of what came next. Foster care sounded like another kind of prison to me, another place where I'd be unwanted, just passed around until I turned 18. But then I met Ellen and David. They were an older couple, gray hair and gentle voices, the kind of people who didn't need to say much to make you feel safe. Their house was nothing fancy, a modest two-story with flower pots on the porch and the smell of cinnamon always drifting from the kitchen. But the moment I stepped inside, it felt different from any place I'd lived since my dad died. Ellen pressed a warm hand on my shoulder and said, "You're home now, Grace. You don't have to be afraid here." I almost cried right there in the doorway, because no one had said words like that to me in years. The first weeks were awkward. I jumped at every loud noise, flinched when David raised his hand too quickly to reach for something, and kept waiting for the kindness to crack. But it didn't. Ellen tucked blankets around me when I fell asleep on the couch. David fixed my crutches when one slipped out of place. They never asked me to explain my past, never pressed me for details, just gave me quiet space and gentle consistency until I began to believe their care was real. Slowly, I started to heal. My leg mended with time, though it ached on rainy days, a constant reminder of what I'd endured. The bruises faded, but what surprised me most was how my heart softened in their home. For so long, I had believed every adult would betray me, but Ellen and David proved otherwise. They listened when I spoke. They smiled when I entered the room. They didn't see me as a burden. They saw me as family. School became my refuge again. With their encouragement, I threw myself into my studies, determined to use my mind as a way forward. I stayed late for tutoring, joined clubs again, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to dream. College didn't feel impossible anymore. A career, independence, a future where I wasn't defined by scars. All of it started to feel within reach. One evening, Ellen sat beside me as I studied at the kitchen table. She brushed a strand of hair from my face and said, "Grace, you're stronger than you know. What happened to you doesn't have to define who you become." Her words sank deep, wrapping around that broken part of me and stitching it back together piece by piece. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was building. In their home, I wasn't the broken girl on the floor. I was Grace Miller, someone who could stand again, someone who could dream again. And this time, I knew I wouldn't face the future alone. The courthouse smelled of old paper and polished wood, but to me it carried the weight of years of fear and silence. Months had passed since that night, and I had spent them healing, gathering strength, and preparing for this moment. My cast was gone, though my limp reminded me of what Mark had taken. But as I walked into the courtroom with Ellen and David beside me, I felt steady. Today wasn't about fear, it was about truth. When I took the stand, my hands trembled, but my voice did not. I told the jury everything. The nights of shouting, the bruises hidden under long sleeves, the moment my legs snapped while my mother watched in silence. The evidence I had collected backed up every word. Recordings of Mark's threats filled the courtroom, each one landing heavier than the last. Photos of bruises were passed around like proof of my survival. For once, I wasn't invisible. Every eye in that room was on me, and for the first time, I wanted to be seen. Mark sat at the defense table, his jaw tight, his eyes narrowed. He tried to look confident, but I saw something in him I had never seen before: defeat. When the judge read the verdict, guilty of assault and child abuse, his mask finally cracked. The sound of the gavel echoed like thunder, and the chains around his wrists clinked as he was led away. Then came Susan, my mother. She hadn't spoken to me in months, but now, with the courtroom nearly empty, she broke down. Tears streamed down her face as she reached toward me. "Grace, please," she sobbed. "I made mistakes. I was scared. Forgive me." I looked at her, the woman who had once tucked me in at night, the woman who had once promised to keep me safe. But all I saw was the figure who had stood frozen in that doorway while I screamed for help. My voice was calm when I answered, "No, you chose him over me. I don't forgive that." Her sobs grew louder, but I turned away. Jason's downfall was quieter, but no less certain. Without his father's protection, and with charges for harassment and underage drinking, his reputation crumbled. The smirk he had worn so proudly was gone. Friends abandoned him. Teachers stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt, and for the first time, he had to face the consequences of his cruelty. When it was over, I walked out of the courthouse between Ellen and David, their hands steady on my shoulder. The sun was warm on my face, and for the first time in years, the air felt light-free. I wasn't the broken girl lying on the floor anymore. I was someone who had stood up, spoken out, and won. As we walked down the steps, I whispered to myself, I may have been broken on that floor, but I rose stronger than they ever imagined. And this time I believed it. Do you believe Grace made the right choice by cutting ties with her mother, or should she have given her another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really like to hear your opinion. And if stories like this move you, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you'll always know when a new one is posted.